Two wealthy brothers possessed everything: authority, achievement, and an inseparable connection. Until one fateful evening, when they entered a dilapidated diner and encountered a waitress who transformed their lives forever. She possessed nothing but a secret that could shatter their world and redefine all they believed about love, loyalty, and their own identities. The IPO celebration was excessively noisy. Crystal glasses chimed against the smooth marble. Photographers flitted about like insects, and radiant smiles beamed beneath the sparkling chandeliers. Lucas Bailey lingered by the window of the high-rise ballroom, observing the city sparkle beneath him, feeling a sense of disconnection from the festivities he had played a part in orchestrating. Across the room, his younger brother Aiden lifted a glass, surrounded by yet another group of investors and influencers, all chuckling a bit too heartily at a tale Aiden likely concocted on the fly. Their company had recently gone public, following 3 years filled with turmoil, sacrifice, and countless sleepless nights, and now the world was heralding them as geniuses. However, Lucas had other thoughts occupying his mind. He pondered how insignificant it all seemed in the light of triumph. As the clock struck midnight, Aiden emerged next to him, casually unbuttoning the collar of his shirt, while using the back of his hand to wipe the sweat from his brow. "Let's leave this place," he remarked, his gaze fixed elsewhere. "A place that offers authentic cuisine. Absolutely no cameras allowed. No shrimp on skewers." Lucas chose not to engage in a dispute. 15 minutes later, they strolled down a serene side street bordering the financial district, jackets discarded, ties loosened, the day's tension gradually ebbing away from their shoulders. That's when they noticed it. An aged diner nestled between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, still welcoming, lights buzzing with a gentle hum, neon sign flickering ever so slightly. The air was thick with the scent of charred coffee and the nostalgia of worn vinyl seats. A handful of weary individuals slumped over their plates of pancakes and partially filled mugs. The brothers settled into a booth by the window, and that was the moment she approached. She appeared weary, hair gathered casually into a relaxed bun. Without any makeup, genuine expressions only. Only serene, inscrutable eyes and a notepad held in one hand. "What will it be?" she inquired, her voice steady and calm, as if she had uttered those words countless times before. Lucas hesitated before responding. Her tone carried a challenge, as if she wasn't genuinely inquiring about their dinner preferences, but rather testing whether they could even articulate what they desired. Aiden smiled, attempting to decipher the specials behind her, but his words lingered in a space between allure and astonishment. Pancakes," he said after a moment, then chuckled. "Apologies. A lengthy day." She acknowledged him with a slight nod, her response muted, before shifting her attention to Lucas. He merely uttered the word coffee. His gaze locked onto her apron, as if he were attempting to decipher a mystery without any clear idea of what he sought. She vanished from sight behind the counter. Aiden gave him a gentle nudge. "Are you all right?" Lucas remained silent. Upon her return with the coffee and pancakes, silence enveloped the moment. Yet, Lucas caught the fleeting look she cast at his hand, adorned with the watch their father had gifted them when the company was merely a concept jotted down on a napkin. She turned and walked away, as if none of it mattered, as if she hadn't just altered something delicate between them. Their meal was accompanied by a quiet stillness that lingered in the air. Aiden tossed out a handful of jokes, primarily to bridge the silence, yet Lucas hardly reacted. Eventually, Aiden leaned in and remarked, "You're behaving like someone who just encountered a specter." Lucas glanced upward, his eyes narrowing slightly, and remarked softly, "That woman carries more depth in her gaze than the entire boardroom put together." Aiden arched an eyebrow. "Your fascination with tragic poetry has always been evident. Perhaps she is simply fatigued." Yet Lucas remained silent. For some reason, he sensed that her weariness ran deeper than mere fatigue. She was enduring. He found himself unable to articulate the reason, yet an urgent curiosity surged within him to uncover the details of her survival. They departed, leaving behind a generous $100 tip, and stepped into the embrace of the night. The city appeared somewhat different. And neither did the brothers, though both were reluctant to acknowledge it just yet. A shift had occurred in that diner, an unnameable transformation felt by both of them. Yet both would return. Not intended for the pancakes, not even for the brew. For her, they returned 3 nights later. Not together, yet it felt as if fate had intervened, though neither of them would ever confess it. Lucas was the first to arrive shortly after 9, wearing a relaxed charcoal sweater and dark jeans instead of his usual sharp suit. He settled into the familiar booth by the window, requested coffee once more, and when she delivered it in silence, he gave a soft, lingering thanks that hung in the atmosphere a moment too long. She acknowledged but moved on swiftly. The name tag displayed, Emma. He failed to observe that during the initial encounter. He whispered her name, a gentle murmur to himself, after she had turned and left. At 9:24, Aiden entered, taken aback to find Lucas already present. He lifted his eyebrows, a smirk playing on his lips, as if to convey, seriously? Are you also in the same boat? Lucas remained silent. Aiden lounged in the booth across from me, exchanging playful banter with the cook at the counter, as if he were a regular, familiar with the place like an old friend. Emma finally approached, her gaze darting momentarily between the two siblings. She refrained from questioning their presence once more. She casually noted Aiden's order for waffles this time and strolled away as if it were of no consequence. But it didn't mean anything. Neither of them. Throughout the upcoming week, they kept coming back repeatedly, each time at varying hours, but consistently offering the same rationale. I happened to be in the area. Though they never addressed her explicitly, an undeniable change rippled through their interactions. They continued to negotiate agreements and conduct interviews, yet their exchanges now carried a sharper tone, clipped phrases, an underlying strain, and moments of silence that had previously been absent. Lucas began to look into the diner's operating hours during his breaks between meetings. Aiden often made an extra effort following client dinners. Emma observed. Naturally, she did. Yet, she remained silent. She toiled through late shifts, tidied up after rowdy college students, brushed off remarks, dealt with impolite patrons, and offered smiles only when they were genuine, which was seldom. Yet, with them, there was an unmistakable shift. She never engaged in flirtation. She always moved on swiftly. There was a gentle tenderness in the way she poured Lucas's coffee and in her recollection of Aiden's peculiar allergy to cinnamon, all without him needing to mention it. On a stormy night, the rain poured relentlessly. The streets glistened with the glow of headlights reflecting off the puddles. Lucas lingered at the office, yet an inexplicable force drew him back to that diner once more. As he entered, she was absent from her usual spot at the counter. It was peculiar that he approached the newcomer on duty. The reply caused him to hesitate. Emma? She summoned the night with her voice. After months of waiting, that evening he chose not to return home. He navigated the roads for an hour, aimlessly wandering, feeling a disquiet that eluded his understanding. The following day she returned. Weary, more pallid than normal, yet present. He refrained from inquiring about what had transpired. Instead, he tucked a small note beneath his receipt that said, "If you ever need anything, you can ask me. There are no inquiries." He failed to provide his signature. It was left unspoken. However, when he returned, a second sugar packet accompanied his coffee. He always avoided sugar. She was aware of that, transcended the sweetness. In the meantime, Aiden opted for an alternative strategy. He brought a smile to her face. He began to surprise her with an assortment of items. Books adorned with witty remarks, playlists he had crafted on vintage USB drives, and even a small cactus that found its home behind the counter. He engaged in playful banter, but always with a light touch. Just enough to elicit a smirk when she believed no one was observing. Yet, there were instances when her eyes held on to Lucas for just a heartbeat more. Serene instances, the type that lacks luster. They descend, gradually and profoundly. And then arrived the evening when she failed to appear once more. This time, both of them approached it with utmost seriousness. Aiden made 2 calls to the diner. As Lucas passed by, he noticed the lights were off earlier than they typically were. A sense of unease lingered in the air. They kept their thoughts to themselves, yet an unspoken understanding lingered between them. Their curiosity had evolved into something deeper. They were deeply engaged, and not in the manner they typically were. This was not an agreement. This was a bit more chaotic. Personal matter. Emma stayed away from the diner for 3 days. Not a single shift. Not a word at all. Her whereabouts remained a mystery, and the reasons for her disappearance were unknown to all. The manager remained reticent, whispering something about personal leave, yet it was evident that no one had truly heard from her. Lucas first caught wind of it during one of his late-night excursions, and the instant the cashier spoke those words, a part of him plummeted. He departed, his coffee untouched, and spent the night awake. Aiden arrived the next afternoon, sharing a laugh with the cook until he noticed Emma was absent from the kitchen. Upon receiving the same ambiguous explanation, his demeanor changed immediately. That evening he reached out to Lucas. They hadn't spoken outside of work in weeks, and this was the first time it happened. "She has departed," Aiden remarked. "I understand," Lucas replied. "What are we up to?" Aiden inquired, his tone subdued, revealing a deeper sincerity. "Do you sense it as well?" Lucas remained silent. There was no reason to put on a facade. Both were aware. The following day, Aiden acted on a whim. He approached the manager to request Emma's emergency contact information. Naturally, they wouldn't provide it, but financial influence often outweighs regulations. Aiden's generous contribution to the diner's renovation fund brought forth a name: Sarah Clark. A phone number. A location on the other side of town. Lucas discovered the news in his usual manner, via one of the assistants, who spotted a vehicle reserved under Aiden's name making its way to a residential area. Lucas decided to forego his meetings and pursued the path ahead. He reminded himself not to interfere, yet a fire ignited within him at the mere idea of Aiden being the first to lay eyes on her, or even more troubling, being the one she allowed to enter. They each made their entrance just moments apart. Aiden stood at the door, knocking, a box of soup and crackers in hand, as if offering a clumsy gesture of reconciliation. Lucas parked down the street and approached slowly, noting the expression on Aiden's face. It wasn't one of anger. Rather, it was a look of resignation. She gently pushed the door open. In that fleeting instant, silence enveloped them all. Emma appeared more diminutive than they recalled. Faint, without any makeup, clad in an oversized sweater and clutching a phone in one hand. She appeared as though she hadn't anticipated being discovered, especially not by both of them. The apartment behind her lay shrouded in darkness and silence. No television. Silence prevails. Only quietude. "I'm fine," she finally replied, her voice raspy. "I simply required some distance." "You vanished," Aiden said softly. "You really frightened us," Lucas said, his voice dropping. She paused momentarily before moving aside. "You may as well step inside. You're not the type of man who simply fades away." Within the confines of the apartment, there was an air of stark minimalism. Compact sofa. A coffee table adorned with a collection of books and scattered empty tea mugs. A photograph hangs on the wall, capturing a boy, perhaps around 15, grinning widely with Emma by his side. Lucas gazed intently at it. "My brother," she remarked, locking eyes with him. "He passed away last year. Fentanyl." He maintained his sobriety for 7 months, but then one fateful night. Aiden lowered himself into the seat with deliberate care. "I apologize. He was everything I had remaining," she went on. "Mother has departed. Father was never a part of my life. It's been just me ever since." Lucas remained on his feet. "Why didn't you share that with us?" She released a sardonic chuckle. "What do you want to know? That I was shattered? That I don't belong in your realm?" Aiden replied with a firm, "No, that you possessed humanity. That's everything we required." Emma glanced back and forth between them. "I aim to avoid being an inconvenience. You possess this as well, Empire. Your gaze upon others suggests an innate understanding of their worth." I didn't want to be just another equation. Lucas advanced with purpose. You were never just a number. Your sympathy was not something I sought. Aiden stated, we don't feel sorry for you. Your qualities inspire admiration in us. She averted her gaze, her jaw clenching. It's simpler to keep everyone at a distance. I discovered that quite some time back. At last, Lucas settled into his seat. So, what was the reason for allowing us to continue coming back? Emma hesitated before responding. When she finally spoke, her voice was little more than a breath. For the first time in years, I craved visibility. The ensuing silence held no awkwardness. It was burdensome yet essential. Aiden leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the floor. Lucas's gaze remained fixed on her. They found themselves in a shared space, caught in the tension between their expected identities and the new selves emerging, shaped by her influence. Emma rose to her feet. Time is essential for me. I find myself uncertain about what this is or what direction I wish for it to take. But I understand that I can't manage the two of you hovering around as if I'm some sort of trophy. We aren't circling, Lucas stated. Indeed, that is correct. You are siblings. However, allowing this to affect you could lead to your downfall. She approached the door and swung it open, her intent unmistakable. There was no dispute. They have just departed. Silently, individually. On that night, the Bailey brothers remained silent. Not face to face. Not via phone. For the first time, it transcended mere commerce. It revolved around her. Neither of them understood how to achieve victory without sacrificing everything else. 3 weeks went by, and neither Lucas nor Aiden made their way back to the diner. Not due to a lack of desire, but because a chasm had formed between them, raw and undeniable. After years of interaction, they finally began to steer clear of one another outside of meetings, their exchanges reduced to the most essential, deliberate, and detached communication. The once seamless and intuitive rhythm of their business partnership turned sharp and disjointed. Choices lingered, emotions escalated rapidly, and the group sensed the tension. Even Monica, their most seasoned executive, brought it up once during a heated strategy call. Whatever the situation is between you two, she said with a cutting tone, resolve it. As it begins to seep onto the floor, neither replied. As neither had the knowledge to do so, Lucas immersed himself in the depths of the company, engaging in lengthy negotiations, reworking outdated projects, and enduring hours of investor calls with an almost mechanical detachment. He grew more silent, more distant, as if shutting out the world around him would protect him from overwhelming emotions. He couldn't help but think of Emma all the time. In the quiet solitude of the night, as the office lay deserted, he often found himself gazing at the photograph of her brother displayed in her apartment. The expression on her face in that photograph, filled with hope, youth, and completeness, lingered in his mind. He understood that that version of her was a thing of the past, and somehow he loathed that he hadn't been aware of her back then. Aiden, in contrast, openly displayed the profound impact it had on him. He withdrew from his responsibilities, neglecting calls, avoiding meetings, and vanishing into the depths of late nights and extended weekends without a word. He began to seek solitude, gravitating towards spaces that offered no demands or anticipations. The allure he typically donned as a shield had vanished. He could no longer pretend, not with her silence resonating more profoundly than any denial he had ever experienced. And not with Lucas, who wouldn't even meet his gaze. One evening, almost a month since they had last encountered Emma, Lucas returned home to discover Aiden perched on the steps of their father's old townhouse, a place neither of them had set foot in for years. The gentle spring rain fell softly, casting a shimmering glow on the streets, while Aiden had a bottle of scotch nestled at his feet. "You're late," Aiden remarked, his gaze fixed elsewhere. "I hadn't intended to show up. You always say that right before you arrive." Lucas settled next to him in silence. They remained there for a considerable time, simply absorbing the sound of the rain. When Aiden eventually broke the quiet, his voice was deep and gritty. "I loved her," he expressed. "I believe I still do. even if I'm not entirely sure what that entails. Lucas hesitated before responding. He gazed into the shadows, his heart burdened more than he cared to acknowledge. I believe I did as well, Lucas finally remarked. But I can't tell if it was love or something entirely different. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in ages, and I confused it for love. Does it even matter? Aiden asked, casting a sidelong glance. Lucas shook his head, resolute. Not to her. Not any longer. They lingered in that moment, two brothers bound not by animosity or competition, but by an unspoken connection over the same woman. The silence that enveloped them had transformed, carrying a weight of understanding. Less sharp. More weary. She isn't returning, is she? Aiden inquired. Lucas cast his gaze downward. Would you, if you were in her position? Aiden let out a brief, harsh laugh. No, I would flee. Lucas finally faced him. So what's our next move? Aiden let out a breath. We ceased turning her into the battleground. And that was all. Not a solution. Not forgiveness. Rather a truce. One that emerges not from pride, but from a place of exhaustion and clarity. The following morning, Lucas composed a brief email to Emma. It was concise, devoid of any expectations.
No questions.
Just a note that said, "We're done with the fighting. You don't owe either of us anything. Should you ever wish to converse with either of us, we will be available. Independently, sincerely, **. He hesitated before sending it. He pored over the words repeatedly, weighing each one. Finally, he clicked send. For the first time in weeks, he released a breath free of guilt. Emma perused the email thrice before allowing herself to reply. She found herself devoid of anger, not precisely. The tempest of feelings that had overwhelmed her when they arrived at her doorstep had subsided, yet what lingered was a sense of guarded apprehension, reminiscent of a hurt creature cautiously inching toward a hand that could either offer solace or inflict pain. She found herself grappling with the uncertainty of trust, unsure if she was ready to embrace it at all. Yet, there was an intriguing quality to the tone of the message, calm, deliberate, devoid of urgency, that prompted her to reflect on it. She recognized Lucas's hand in it. The careful choice of his words revealed his intent. Though a part of her still bore the weight of their unvoiced competition, another part recalled the tranquility she experienced while sitting opposite him in that diner, simply sipping coffee and existing in the moment. 2 days later, she responded with a brief message. *let's talk. Only you, *. They encountered each other in a park at the city's edge, a place that felt neutral, public, and open. She was the first to arrive, her hands tucked deep into the pockets of a worn green jacket, hair neatly pulled back in a low braid, and without a trace of makeup. She appeared weary, yet more composed. Lucas moved closer, carefully carrying 2 coffees from a nearby shop. Wordlessly, he extended one to her, and she accepted it, their fingers grazing for a fleeting moment. The moment was fleeting, yet it planted a seed. They perched on a bench that offered a view of a tranquil pond, where ducks glided leisurely across the surface. Emma remained silent at first. She took a sip of her drink, observing the wind as it danced through the trees, allowing the silence to linger. Lucas remained patient, understanding that her stillness was not a void, but a moment of contemplation. Guardianship. I believed you two would end up destroying one another. She finally spoke, her tone gentle yet unwavering. And I didn't wish to be the cause of that. You weren't, he said. We almost did that on our own. Emma nodded slowly, as if she had already anticipated it. I was taken aback by how deeply both of you became involved in this. It all unfolded without my awareness until it was beyond my control. Lucas placed his coffee on the table and leaned in, his forearms resting on his knees. I felt the same way. Initially, I believed it was merely a distraction, a sense of curiosity. Yet, I began to observe subtle details, like how your voice lingered in my mind when silence enveloped the space. How I would catch myself revisiting unfinished dialogues between us. Emma's lips formed a gentle smile, not entirely a smile. And Aiden? He cherished the way you made him feel vibrant, Lucas admitted sincerely. You brought to his awareness that he possessed a heart, and he pursued that sensation as if it were essential for survival. Yet I believe he realized from the start that he wasn't the one who captured your gaze in those silent moments. It was Emma who looked at him then, truly looked. Why didn't you speak up earlier? I didn't want to be just another person trying to take something from you, he explained. So I held back. And then it became too late. No, she replied, shaking her head softly. It wasn't too late. I simply needed to determine if either of you would cease your attempts to win me over. They lingered in quietude once more, this time with a gentler air. The pond glistened beneath the waning afternoon light. Nearby, a child's laughter rang out as her dog tugged playfully at the leash. The noise anchored them in reality, in the simplicity of it all, and somehow that rendered the moment even more significant. Lucas faced her. I'm not asking for anything. Not today. Not ever unless you're willing to offer it. But I'm here, Emma. And I'm not going anywhere. She glanced at her coffee, then back at him. What if I don't know what I want? Then we wait, he replied. Neither together nor apart. Just truly. After weeks of tension, her shoulders finally eased. The moment felt light, free from the burden of expectation. There was no urgency to make everything right.
No ticking clock.
They separated without a single touch. Yet there was an unspoken bond that surpassed mere physical connection. A delicate comprehension lingered between them, the kind of silence that takes its time to settle in. That evening, Emma found herself in her dimly lit apartment, revisiting old journal entries that had gathered dust since her brother's passing. She reflected on sorrow, on resilience, and on the peculiar, unwavering essence Lucas had transformed into effortlessly. She was uncertain about what lay ahead. Yet, for the first time, a spark of curiosity ignited within her. The weeks that followed drifted by in a gentle, unassuming manner, akin to puzzle pieces fitting together quietly, without any grand announcement. Emma and Lucas didn't plunge into anything overly dramatic or hasty. There were no grand proclamations, no sweeping scenes of cinematic love. Instead, it unfolded in the little moments. Brief text exchanges, surprise coffees left at her door, and serene strolls that concluded in silence rather than farewells. Lucas had adapted to her rhythm, while Emma discovered that not every moment of quiet signaled danger. Occasionally, silence signified security. Trust was built piece by piece. She posed the questions that had lingered in her mind, those she had hesitated to voice previously, about his upbringing, his initial setbacks, the moments of solitude he experienced even amidst a throng. He no longer sidestepped her inquiries. He responded, occasionally after thoughtful silences, sometimes with responses that were raw and unrefined, yet undeniably authentic. That was what truly counted. Lucas, in his own journey, discovered transformations he hadn't anticipated. He ceased cramming his calendar to the brim. He embarked on lengthy journeys with no particular endpoint in mind. He ceased the habit of glancing at his phone every 10 minutes. When Emma spoke, he absorbed her words, not merely with focus, but with a serene presence that encouraged her to share even more. He never sought intimacy, yet she offered it, bit by bit, until one night she dozed off on his shoulder while watching a film, and he remained still for an hour, hesitant to disrupt the fragile bond of her trust. Aiden had kept his distance. Their emails regarding work were polite and effective, but the gap between them remained unbridged. Lucas bore a silent guilt, one he kept to himself. He understood that Aiden was unprepared for the events that unfolded. He also recognized that Aiden had played fair, had not resorted to deceit with Emma, and had not sought victory at the expense of others. The silence, in its own way, deepened the ache. There was no treachery to point fingers at, only the weight of absence. On a warm afternoon in early spring, Aiden made his appearance. Lucas spotted him in the lobby of their office building, hands tucked into his pockets, sunglasses still perched on his face. He appeared thinner, a bit weary, yet there was a sense of calm about him, as if the sharpness of his demeanor had softened with the passage of time. Lucas remained silent initially, merely gesturing toward the elevator. They lingered in his office, the city skyline sprawling behind them. Neither sat. "She's doing okay," Lucas said finally. "I know," Aiden replied. "I encountered her last week." Lucas stiffened, yet Aiden gestured for calm. "Take it easy. It wasn't as it seems. I was at the center where she volunteers. I had no idea she would be present. We had a conversation that lasted 4 to 5 minutes. Lucas kept his gaze lowered. "How was she?" Aiden claimed she was stronger than ever. "She regarded me as if I were a figure from her past, not someone she required in her present." Lucas let out a slow breath. "This wasn't part of my plan." "I understand," Aiden replied. "Neither did I." They lingered in silence for a moment, an ancient bond fracturing between them, not out of anger, but through raw honesty. Aiden eventually moved closer and stated, "You didn't take her from me. She simply noticed you." Lucas glanced at him, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I never wanted to lose you because of this." "You didn't," Aiden replied. "I departed. It was necessary. Yet here I am again. And I believe I'm prepared to let go of that resentment." Lucas nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Do you think we can mend this?" Aiden replied, "We won't mend it by acting as if it never occurred. Perhaps we could begin with dinner, and let's keep business out of it." That evening, Lucas shared details of the meeting with Emma. She absorbed every word, her fingers wrapped around a warm tea mug, her gaze gentle. "That's good," she remarked quietly. "You need your brother." Lucas gazed at her intently. "And what is it that you need?" Emma replied with a subtle smile. "Time. Cosmos." Yet simultaneously in this moment, silence enveloped them for a moment. Then Lucas extended his hand across the table, grasping hers with a tenderness that felt entirely new. She allowed him to hold it. Spring transitioned into early summer without much fanfare. The city discarded its dullness, and warmth enveloped the sidewalks and storefronts, a subtle renewal that resonated with Emma, even if it went unnoticed by others. She found herself breathing in a new way, more deeply, free from the constant anticipation of loss. Her apartment began to transform from a mere refuge into a welcoming sanctuary. Books lined the windowsill, mismatched mugs added a cozy charm, and a plant, an unexpected gift from Lucas, thrived in the corner, quietly affirming her unspoken desire for it. She cherished it all. She remained unaware until she began to engage with it. Lucas seamlessly integrated into her life without overstepping boundaries. He ceased his attempts to mend her, no longer presenting solutions or arriving with meticulously devised strategies. Instead, he simply appeared to sit beside her as she worked or to accompany her home from the center after long hours. Their bond had softened, replaced by a tranquility that required no validation. At times, they would converse for hours. At other moments, silence enveloped them. He never sought more than what she offered. Yet, in her giving, through subtle gestures, fleeting touches, and glances that seemed to stretch into eternity, he cherished those instances as if they were the very essence of life. One Saturday, Lucas extended an invitation to her for a dinner party. It was an intimate affair, featuring board members, a handful of team leads, and some of the company's long-standing friends. He didn't push her, merely expressed his desire for her presence. She wavered initially, uncertain of her place among a gathering of refined individuals with inherited wealth and rehearsed grins. Yet, a change stirred within her, and for the first time, she refused to allow fear to dictate the conclusion. She accepted. Clad in a modest black dress, she adorned herself with no accessories. Her hair cascaded freely over her shoulders, and the lipstick she chose seemed to echo a challenge she had set for herself. Lucas refrained from offering her insincere praise. Instead, he held her gaze a moment longer than typical upon her arrival and simply stated, "You're here." That sufficed. The evening began at a leisurely pace. They offered polite smiles, posed ambiguous questions, and struggled to categorize her. She made no apologies for her presence. She stood her ground. She absorbed the conversations around her, responding with sincerity and authenticity, never masking her true self. As the evening progressed, A guest from an education nonprofit approached her, expressing interest in her insights for a community initiative. Lucas observed the moment from a distance, a sense of pride evident in his gaze as he witnessed her impact. Once the final guest departed, Lucas and Emma lingered in the garden behind the townhouse, the soft illumination of string lights enveloping them. She removed her heels, letting her toes sink into the cool grass. He offered her a glass filled with a refreshing, citrusy drink, then leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on her rather than the stars above. "I've never brought anyone into this world before," he said, his voice low and tinged with hesitation. Emma tilted her head, curiosity piqued. "Why now?" she asked, but he remained silent for a moment, lost in thought. Then, "It feels as though it no longer possesses me." She stepped closer, placing her glass down. "You don't have to remain the same version of yourself all the time, you realize. You can embrace all the chaotic, subtle, resilient, intricate facets of yourself. I don't seek the polished figure in formal attire. I simply desire the one who shares my company on those restless Tuesday nights." Lucas gazed at her as if she had uttered a profound truth. "I don't want to return to the way things were before you." Emma smiled, not broadly, but with a measured and unwavering assurance. "Then don't." He extended his hand toward hers, not abruptly, but as if he had been anticipating this moment. And when their fingers intertwined, she remained still, not withdrawing. In the tranquility of the garden, beneath a sky that lingered between dusk and dawn, a subtle change occurred between them once more, not driven by haste, but by a serene assurance. Not due to perfection, but because it had, at last, become genuine. Emma held back her feelings from Lucas the moment she first understood them. It dawned on her subtly during a mundane morning at the grocery store, of all settings. He was engaged in a light-hearted debate with an elderly woman over the final loaf of fresh sourdough, effortlessly winning her over without any real effort. Emma stood a few feet away, observing the interaction as if it were a scene from another's existence, and something within her softened entirely. There was no dramatic score accompanying the moment, no epiphany that felt like a peak, just a profound, quiet understanding that this man, with all his composure and past and measured patience, had settled into her heart for good. Yet, she remained silent, not due to fear that he might not reciprocate, but because she desired the moment to unfold perfectly, when her words would resonate as genuine rather than burdensome. That moment arrived 3 weeks later, on the anniversary of her brother's passing. She had kept the significance of the date from Lucas until the day prior. Even then, she minimized the situation, feigning indifference as if it were merely another challenging day she could navigate with ease. Lucas didn't attempt to sway her perspective. He simply stated, "I'll be there," and he was. They arrived at the cemetery in the early hours, just before the sun had completely emerged, the sky still adorned with hues of silver and blue. Emma had 2 paper cranes tucked away in her jacket pocket. One she had meticulously folded the night prior, one for her brother, one for herself. She remained mostly silent during their visit, and Lucas chose not to press her for words. Afterward, they drove aimlessly, the road unfolding before them until they stumbled upon a lake that held echoes of her childhood visits with her brother. They settled on the dock's edge, legs dangling above the water, a refreshing breeze brushing against their skin. Emma rested her head on Lucas's shoulder, her eyes fluttering shut, weighed down by nostalgia and sorrow, yet comforted by his presence. He wrapped an arm around her softly, waiting in silence until she found her voice. "I thought I'd feel empty today," she murmured. "But I don't. I long for him, yet it transcends mere absence now. It has evolved into recollection, an appreciation, and perhaps a touch of tranquility." Lucas gazed down at her, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You are the most resilient person I know." Emma shook her head. "I'm not. I simply learned how to endure." "No," he said. "You discovered the art of existence. That's the true challenge." And that was the moment she spoke. No grand gestures or dramatic pauses, just a quiet declaration, her gaze still fixed on the lake. "I love you." The words stood firm, They sought nothing. They simply emerged, complete, as though they had long awaited their moment to be expressed. Lucas paused for a moment, turning to her and resting his hand on hers. The expression in his eyes conveyed all that needed to be said before his words followed. I love you too. For quite some time I believe I felt this way. I simply struggled to express it. Emma's smile was gentle, not born of relief, but rather a sense of understanding. She had at last allowed herself to embrace the notion that this was genuine, that love could unfold gradually and remain authentic, that it didn't need to be painful to hold significance. They lingered by the lake until the sun climbed to its zenith, warm light cascading over the water and draping the day in golden hues. No grand decisions were made, no vows of eternity exchanged, no discussions of what lay ahead. Yet, as they journeyed home in quietude, their fingers woven together on the center console, the air around them brimming with something more profound than assurance, it was tranquility. Later that week, Emma found a letter waiting for her in the mail. It was from Aidan, a straightforward, handwritten note. He shared with her that he had secured a position with a relief organization abroad, focused on rebuilding schools and teaching English. He expressed that he had gained clarity, and while he held no regrets about his feelings for her, he felt a sense of relief knowing she had found someone who could truly understand her. He concluded with a poignant remark that lingered in her heart for days. Asterisk, some people are lessons, some are homes. I believe you embodied both. Asterisk, she exclaimed after reading it, not from sorrow, but because it felt like the final missing piece settling softly into place. By the end of summer, Emma had become a member of the nonprofit board that Lucas had helped finance, and she began to write once more, not only in journals but also essays, short stories, and even the initial chapters of a book. Her past remained, yet it no longer held sway over her. She continued to visit her brother's grave. Paper cranes remained neatly folded. The familiar green jacket still draped her shoulders on those days when she sought stability. Yet her smile had grown brighter. When she smiled, it illuminated her eyes. Lucas, on the other hand, approached his work with a fresh sense of equilibrium. He continued to lead the company, participated in meetings and forged deals, but he no longer operated from behind a barrier. He kept a photo of Emma on his desk, not one where she posed or smiled for the camera, but one he had taken quietly, on a walk, when she was staring up at the sky, her eyes reflecting something bigger than either of them. And on some evenings, when they sat together with music playing low and no need to fill the silence, Lucas would reach for her hand just as he did on the dock. Each time she would let him. She chose him and he never ceased to choose her. The resonance of the story's ending lies in its avoidance of dramatic twists or contrived conclusions. It pays tribute to the gradual, arduous, and profoundly human process of healing. For Emma, for Lucas, and even for Aidan. There are no flawless triumphs here. Only authentic growth, meaningful connections, and subtle emotional redemption. Emma doesn't transform into someone entirely different. She simply becomes more of who she truly is. Lucas arrives not as a hero, but as someone who understands the value of simply being there, without the urge to fix or control. Aidan's journey, while it leads to separation, is not a failure. It is an essential part of his quest for inner tranquility. This narrative unfolds in a way that love is expressed not through dramatic displays, but through gentle support, recognition, and the choice to be with someone without the desire to possess them. For me, that's more than a romantic conclusion. It's a thoughtful, sincere one. Those are the conclusions that linger in our minds.